Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this session on creative producing at the IDFAcademy. My name is Isabel Arrate Fernandez. I work for the festival, for IDFA, where I run a documentary fund called IDFA Bertha Fund. We work with filmmakers from Africa, Asia, Latin America, and the Middle East, and work a lot with starting producers in doing that. And it's my pleasure to moderate this session today, where we have the wonderful Bianca Oana with us. Please give her a warm applause. We will be talking about her experiences in producing some amazing films, like Touch Me Not by Adina Pintenili, the winner of the Golden Bear in Berlin, and the films of Alexander Nanou, like Collective, that were screening at this festival, and one of his previous films called Toto and His Sister. Bianca, welcome. Thank you for being here. Maybe just to start this off, it would be interesting to know how you got into producing and film.
Well, thank you for the invitation, Isabel. It's a pleasure to be here again. I feel every time I come to it, I feel like part of the family. And yeah, I've been coming to it quite early in my career with Alexander's film. How I started? Okay, so I studied screenwriting actually in the Bucharest National Film School, and the problem I encountered was that we don't have a production department in Bucharest. We only have a master's degree in production, so basically when we were in the first years, we had to produce, the directors were supposed to be sort of producing on their own or managing everything on their own. And the teachers were telling them that my scripts, the ones that I was giving to directors, were too complicated to produce, so they wouldn't allow us to make them. So then I thought, okay, I'm gonna, be jobless if I get out of film school without having at least one script being made into a film. So I said I might as well sacrifice and do, you do all the creative work before you write the script, and then you just produce the script. So that should be easy, right? Yeah. So that's how I got into production. Actually, I started working with two directors, during film school. One of them was Ivana Mladenovic, who is a Serbian woman filmmaker who came to Romania to study film, and we started doing her short films together, write and produce. And then at some point in 2009, when we both graduated, she started doing her first feature documentary that we co-wrote, in the sense that we developed this dossier with which we applied to the National Film Fund. And then I started producing, because she said, I need you to be there because you're the one who knows best what my intentions are, because we wrote together. So I need you to be there to support me also in the process of making the film. So that's how I got actually into documentary producing. Before that, I was very much focused on development. I was the head of development of Strada Film, which is one of the bigger production companies in Romania for art house. I developed a film that is called If I Want to Whistle, I Whistle by Florin Șerban, that won the Grand Jury Prix and the Alfred Bauer Award for Innovation in 2010 in Berlin. So that was the first film that I actually worked on in development, and as a junior producer with Daniel Mitulescu, the producer of the film. So I was doing that in parallel. I was just reading scripts and talking with the other producers, actually deciding what would be good to take on as a production house and further develop. So when Ivana said, I want you to be involved hands-on on the project, that kind of shifted a little bit. I shifted even more towards production. And I kind of drifted out of screenwriting, focused a lot on producing her film, and then in parallel developing Toto and his sisters. And that's actually that was quite a ride with both films because they were overlapping a little bit. For sure with Ivana's film, it was her first film, her first feature documentary, and my first feature film producing on my own. We were inside the company, Strada Film, so I had seniors. But there were a lot of things that we didn't know, how to take on. And it was about a group of juvenile delinquents who, it was their first year after they get released from prison, because we have a 1% degree of reintegration in society for juvenile delinquents, which means that basically all of them except one go back to jail out of 100. So we made this film that went and premiered in Tribeca, and then it won the Heart of Sarajevo and Zagreb Docs. She won the Best New Director. And she went on to produce fiction with Ada Solomon later. And I started developing this film with Alexander. The way it happened was that
This is Toto and his sisters.
Yeah, this is Toto and his sisters, sorry. Being in Strada Film, we were working obviously with different projects, and there was this NGO who was supporting one of the short films that the company was producing. And at one point, the NGO president, Valeriu Nicolae, he came to me. The NGO is called Policy Center for Roma and Minorities. And they had just opened this center, alternative center for education inside the school in the ghetto of Bucharest. And he came to me and he said, Bianca, listen, I think we need to make a film there. And I said, okay, I don't know anything about that because, the ghetto is something that it was, for me at least, I was 20-something, 24.
Beginning or end of the
20-something? Beginning, yeah, towards the beginning, 22, 24 maybe, 24 I think. I had never been to the ghetto and did not plan to go anytime soon. And so I said, Valerie, okay, I need to see I can't give you now somebody to write a script about something. So I need to go there and see in order to think who would be appropriate for this. So he organized this field trip for me and my assistant. With camera, I took my camera to take photos, and I went there to take the tour. And it was a huge shock, first of all, to be confronted, with this new land inside my own city that I had been ignorant of, basically. And I took a lot of photos of kids who were just coming and hugging us, it was very emotional. And I went back to Valeria and I said, listen, I don't think we can make a fiction film here. Any fiction you will make will be super fake. We need to develop a documentary. So I started writing a dossier, and we applied for development funding. So without the director, I just wrote the dossier. And we applied for funding at the OSI. Back then, the OSI is the Soros Foundation Open Society Institute. Yeah. Back then, in 2010. In 2010, they were still in Budapest. They had their offices. And they gave us a development grant. And that's when I started looking for potential directors. So I asked some of the producers who were in the same company as me if they know anything, and they recommended 2 directors. One of them was Alexander, who had just won an Emmy for his previous film called The World According to I&B, about this collage artist that does color art from the scraps. He's how do you say, vagabond, I guess? Homeless artist who just goes big overnight. So he had won an Emmy for that. And the second one was Ionuț Pițurescu, who is actually an anthropologist, a visual anthropologist, who had made a film that was screened out of competition in Cannes that year, about a couple of Roma men who were traveling down from the mountain to the city to sell some of the objects that they were creating. They were craftsmen. Yeah, so I went to meet both of them. Basically, I was pitching.
It was already an idea for a film that you had started developing.
Yeah, basically what I did, the application for the OSI back then was very much focused on the impact of a cultural product. And I just focused on what I had seen, you know, on the need of making a film in that area and how that film would positively impact the community, which was something that they were very interested in. So I left out any potential storyline. I just focused on, you know, getting the money to make something. So, and that's the beauty of the Open Society Institute. They were a great supporter for this type of initiatives where you didn't need to be so pinpointed, you know, very precise in what you were doing, but you needed to have, you know, a good insight, and I had that insight. I had the photos, I had my own impressions, so I was able to write something coherent. Yeah, so, and then I met both directors, and with Alex it was, yeah, we got along instantly. It was like a click, you know, and I said, listen, I have this much money, I want to make a film that has a positive impact on this society. He had lived for the vast majority of his life in Germany, and he had come back to make this film with Ion Burladanu. So he was living in Romania just for a couple of years or something, and he didn't know the area either. So he went for the provocation, let's say. He said, okay, let's develop and see what happens. He didn't promise that he will make a film. He told me I need to go there and see if I can find a story. So he spent 6 months in development. He had his camera and his assistant and the car, and he went about every day in the ghetto. And he had found. Yeah, at one point he came back to me after a month and he said, listen, it's so hopeless. Everything is so hopeless there. They didn't have electricity. They didn't have water. It was really gloomy. And we didn't want to make a gloomy film. And we didn't want to reinforce, you know, the image that the Roma community is this very low life community that is stuck there and there's no hope for them. So he said, okay, I think the only light that I see here is in the kids. The kids are still open to the world, and they are still, you know, not worn out by the hardships of life, of adult life, of drugs, and all this inequality, social inequality. So I think we should focus on the kids. And he did. He went to this club, this alternative education club, and he started looking around. He did some classes with the kids, teaching them how to use cameras. And he was sending them, we were giving them handy cams, and they were just coming back with footage. And that's how he met Toto and Andrea, his mid-sister. Yeah.
Maybe we should show the trailer?
Yeah, I brought you 2 trailers of Toto because I thought it would be interesting for you to see the development trailer, which was the trailer we've made for the central pitch, and we presented it here at IDFA.
Yeah, the project was selected for the IDFA forum in what was then called the central pitch.
And we had to make a development trailer, a pitching trailer actually, that would fit in, the format was the pitching format was 7 minutes, and you could show clips up until, I don't know,
3 minutes?
Yeah, 3 minutes, maximum 4. Ours is 3.5. Yeah, and this is really a development trailer because how many of you have seen Toto and his sisters? Is there anybody here? 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah. So I will say a little bit about the story because if the others haven't seen the film. So finally, just to take it from where we left it, Alexander went and started following this young boy, 9-year-old boy called Totonel, who was living with his 2 elder sisters, Andrea, who was at the time 14, and Anna, who was 17. And Anna is a drug addict, and they were waiting for their mother to come out of jail. She had been in jail for the past 7 years, so basically Totonel met her last when he was 2. She went to jail for trafficking heroin, and she had 1 year until she was released. So this is the last year before their mother comes home, and the film follows them, these 3 brothers, in an completely observational manner, up until the day when their mother comes back from jail. So we can show Totonel, the clip called Totonel.
Aș vrea să schimbe cartierul. Aș vrea să se schimbe soara mea. Absolut tot vreau să schimbe. Să nu mai stau cu gândul la mama mea pe mereu. Să am și mama lângă mine.
Noi când am căzut eu la pușcărie, nu au fost despărțiți niciodată, unul de altul. S-au iubit toți 3. N-am făcut nicio diferență între ei. Că n-au crescut cu tată, eu le-am fost și tată și mamă.
Eu când sunt supărată, vine să fac orice, să mă arunc pe geam, să plâng, nu știu. Am niște reacții foarte urâte.
În baza articolului 302 Cod procedură penală, punem în discuție menținerea stării de arest a inculpatei. Aveți cuvântul, doamna procuror.
Vreau să mă fac dansator. M-am uitat la alții oameni și am zis, de ce să fiu și eu ca ei?
Geanta aia lui Vuitton și telefonul, nu stă și mă.
Nu a fost cea mai frumoasă zi din viața mea când am auzit de club. Înainte nu știam să citesc. Am învățat să citesc, am învățat să scriu, am învățat să fac matematică, am învățat geografie, acum trebuie să mai învăț engleză. Ce să învăț mai multe. Doamna, pa sau scriu?
dificile. 1, 2, 3, foarte bine, foarte bine, foarte bine, foarte bine, foarte bine, omule.
Eu uite cum merg.
Să nu termină-te!
Vezi că-ți dau cu cărămida în caz de pula mea aici.
Yeah. So, although it feels like you've watched the whole film in these 3.5 minutes, actually this was, it's a mix of very early development footage, with, like the talking head with the mom. What we did was, when Alex decided, okay, I want to go with these kids, we found out that their mother was in jail, so we went in and shot with the mother, just an interview, just to figure out, okay, what are the dynamics in this story. He had no intention of using talking heads in the film, but when we decided what's the best way to tell the story for a pitch, then we realized we need to give a context, and you needed to see her from before and to hear a little bit of how she thinks. Otherwise, judgment comes very fast, especially in a 3-minute clip. So for us, it was always important, not to try to evade a little bit all the preconceptions that people had already about the Roma community, and people saying, oh, and just another Roma film. We didn't want to be about them being Romas. We wanted to be a story about these kids and how they make it. So the film, the end film is just observational footage. There are a couple of scenes that you've seen also in the trailer that happened when Anna was arrested and she got out of the jail pretty fast. And then when they visit her, they actually just visit her just before, not before she gets out of the jail, out of the prison. So this is a trip that they wanted to make before she would come out. Yeah.
But what was the moment when you when you made this trailer and you presented the project at the forum? It was very early on.
Very early, yeah. That's why I'm saying that basically from the moment that we decided we were going to follow, because it took 6 months to decide, okay, we're going into production. We're doing the film this way. We're following them. From that moment when the decision was made, this footage came in, I think, in the first month and a half, 2 months. And obviously, Alexander he kept on doing the workshop with the cameras. This is part of you saw Andrea talking to the camera, and there's plenty of more footage in the final film with that. But this timeline quite quickly transpired, out of the attempt to edit a pitching trailer, which is quite essential for development. And we were talking about that earlier, that when you it forces you to see how the first images that you've shot can come together in a form, even if it's not the final film, but you have in a way, the idea planted already, and it's so important to have this first 3 minutes assembled in any way.
But I mean, do you think that is that important because it also forces you to, with a subject as big as most subjects, to focus and to make choices, and those choices that you make already in development will determine how you go on in production.
Yeah, definitely. I think it helps because basically when you have 3 minutes, it just distills the essential. So you kind of realize if it holds, if it holds in 3 minutes, then okay, anything that you will develop further in the shooting, and now we're talking documentary, we're not talking fiction, but when you deal with a lot of spontaneity and unforeseen, I think it's so good to know what the core of the story is, and you can grasp it in this first edit, even if it's not a pitching trailer, even if it's just assembled scenes for your National Film Fund application. But they need to. That's where when you get face to face with what you've invested in or what you think you're trying to do. And yeah, for me it's important. And also for Alex, he works that way. I mean, both trailers, and we will see again the trailer for Collective, the pitching trailer, both trailers, he spent a lot of time working on them because it was very important for him to grasp the essence of the film, the bet. What's the bet that you're making? And yeah, of course it can change. I mean, everything that happens with the protagonists during the shooting period, you cannot influence that. But
yeah, but what changes are events that happen and not necessarily the core feeling of what you're wanting to tell.
It. Yeah. And so I would show also, should we show them the trailer of the finished film?
Like the trailer you used to promote the film?
Yeah, like
maybe
the
that's
HBO.
interesting to do the comparison.
Yeah, well, it's still fresh in your minds. The film was picked up by HBO in a co-production, so they made the international trailer. Just to give you a glimpse of its life afterwards, it premiered in San Sebastian, and then it went on to win several awards in the autumn festivals. How we thought about it was that since the film plays very much like fiction, this is Alexander's great achievement, the fact that he can make films that feel like you're watching a fiction film, although they're real. We thought of changing the strategy from doing documentary film festivals to doing festivals that had a mix, that were either presenting fiction and documentary together in a competition, or that had separate fiction and documentary competitions. So that's what we did in the first round of festivals, and then in the second round, of course, we went to documentary only and stuff. But that helped the perception of the people, and it kind of shifted the attention from the film as a documentary to the film as a film and as a story. Yeah, so let's play Toto and his sisters. I think it's the one after Totonel.
Spune de ce mă iubești? Că te iubesc, ești o lume frumoasă. Ce te-ar să mai cât aici? Nu mai plâng.
Petre Siminica este condamnată 7 ani pentru trafic și consum de droguri.
Cât aveți?
3.
Și cine a avut grijă de ei în perioada asta?
Se doar de mama? Lasă-mă! Fă nu, mamă! Lasă-mă!
Pentru cine am riscat? Pentru cine am venit la pușcărie?
Ai plecat de aici. Ai face ceva cu viața ta. Și pe ea nu o mai iubești?
It's a beautiful film.
Yeah, so you see, it's well, the distribution trailer is much more emotional with this music, but there are some shots that you've recognized from the development trailer, and actually the structure, how they ended it with also Toto looking at you. Yeah, so coming back to how you structure the film informs, yeah, the end product. Right. So this had quite a huge success, I would say, in terms of festivals, and it was released in France in cinemas and in Japan. Yeah, and some televisions, a lot of them picked it up. Now it's on iTunes as well, Amazon. Anyway, it went really well. It's one of the most successful Romanian documentaries in terms of its prestige. And from then, when we had our Romanian release at the night of the premiere, Adina Pintilia was there. And to go on with the, with the timeline, and she and her partner watched the film, and she had just gotten the financing from the film fund, from the National Film Fund. She was at the end of her development, and she needed a producer to come and take on the whole film pre-production, everything.
Maybe just, who have you have seen Touch Me Not, the winner of the Golden Bear? Half. Maybe we should show.
We should show something, right?
Something, so you know what we're because this is a very different film.
Yeah.
Than Toto and his sister. And actually, what the thread I wanted to make to go on to Touch Me Not is also that when you're talking about what you were telling us about Toto, it's very it's very clear that there's a strong director with his vision doing what he wanted to do, and at the same time, you talk about it as if you were fully part of the creative process. And I think, particularly with a film like Touch Me Not, which is so different, it's like the interesting bridge to really go also into how you look at your role as a producer, or this creative producing, and in that sense strengthen and help the director get to where he or she is heading. But what clip should we show? The intro one?
I think the intro one, yeah. You're
Thanks.
just gonna see the beginning of the film.
Why haven't you ever asked me, what is this film about? And why haven't I ever told you anyway? Or was it just you not being curious? Or also me being relieved? You don't ask. Was it our silent, comfortable agreement not to talk about it?
At the right time.
One thing I haven't mentioned is that you are allowed to ask questions. So please, if you have any, at any time, just raise your hands and we have somebody with a microphone that will come up to you, and then please stand when you ask the question. So far, are there any questions? No.
Or thoughts?
Yeah, there is one. Yes, they're in the back. Can you please stand? Thank you.
Hi. I and my friend are from Brazil, and we would like to know if you had some budget for the development of the first film for that 6 months. How much and where did you get it from?
Well, I mentioned earlier that it was this development fund from the Open Society Institute, which was an institute in Budapest dealing with human rights, and particularly interested in promoting minorities and the equal rights with minorities and Roma minorities. They had a strand of financing for that, and I made this application through the NGO that was doing the alternative education club in that school where Toto was also studying. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, the money that we got was around 50,000 euro in total. Yeah.
It wasn't huge, but maybe just to link onto that, what we were discussing, Bianca was saying earlier how important it is in that development phase to create the opportunity for a director to go to shoot some, also in relationship with what just came up with having that possibility to edit some material to see what the core is, what the focus is, where you're heading at. But when she said this earlier to me, my observation was, yes, but nowadays they all have easy access to cameras. They just go and shoot and end up with endless hours of material, and that doesn't automatically, I mean, how do you, I guess the question is also, I mean, where is that thin line yeah.
between development and production? Yeah. Well, in Toto is such a nice example for a case study, you know, because it was unusual in the sense that the producer was developing the project first without the director, but really it wasn't much of a development. I mean, I knew just the area, and I had some photos and an idea that I wanted to make this film that would raise awareness and a little bit change a little bit of the consciousness on Roma minorities. So with Toto, in this case, it was quite easy because we needed to find the character. So once we found the character, we knew that we were going to shoot, and we started shooting. And it was very interesting because we had also a deadline in a way, because we had 1 year until the release of The Mother. So we knew that, in a sense, the story informed the production process. So when we decided on the characters, I knew that I need to support or to find money to support a year-long shooting process. Alexander works, he's pretty much an orchestra man. He shoots all of his films. He also edits with editors, but he's also one of the editors involved in the film. He always finishes the editing of his films. So he shoots himself. He doesn't record sound himself. So his team is literally him and another person. And that works, especially when you're in a ghetto and you don't need to be observed by the drug dealers and all that. So that doesn't cost a lot in terms of, budget. But then you need camera, you need to kind of give him a structure for 1 year where you also have an editor who is taking care of all the hundreds of hours of material that are coming in. We had a team of transcriptors, 3 transcriptors who were doing transcripts. As the material was synced and organized, they would take the material and just transcribe everything, because otherwise he had 300 hours of footage that was shot throughout a year, and he couldn't start editing immediately. I mean, we needed to see what happened, when the mother came, so we couldn't edit the film without that. So yeah, there was all this to take into consideration. It was super hard to find, and convince an editor to give us his studio or a little corner of his studio where the transcript would happen and where the synchronizing was happening. And Alex was doing all this by himself with his assistant, It was really hardcore. I mean, we didn't have a big budget for that. And yeah, for him, I guess it was the most hardcore because he was doing all of these things. Yeah, so to answer your question, that I think I answered actually. Yeah,
Yes, you did.
I did.
Were there any other questions? No, so let's move on to Touch Me Not, because you were just saying that you got on board of the film when Adina was almost done doing the development, so you were not...
I wasn't part of the development.
You weren't part of the process?
I inherited the development, yeah. She had also done a trailer for development, which I've seen. Luckily, it was such a good development that, I could inherit. I completely understood where she wants to go. Although by the process that she's doing, you never know where you're going to end up. And I'm going to make a little introduction into her filmmaking universe for the people to know. So Adina started as a documentary director, very much interested in different norms, or what is the non-normative. Her first medium-length film was called Don't Get Me Wrong. She made it in one of the coolest, I'm going to advertise a little bit now, one of the coolest documentary programs that we have in Romania. It's an international residency for documentary filmmakers. It's called Aristoteles Workshop. It's very cool. You go there, you go to an area of Romania for 5 weeks, and you're supposed to find a story, shoot it, and edit it in 5 weeks. You get tutors from around the world, very good ones, filmmakers or producers that are there with you, and they give you feedback on the edit, on the development, and so on. So she was in the first Aristoteles in 2006, I think, or 5. And she did this film, Don't Get Me Wrong, about in mental institution for mentally disabled people. It's a very beautiful and empathic look on these people who are there, and very creative as well. And from then on, she started developing Touch Me Not. So immediately after going to, she went and won the Doc Leipzig with the film. She went to Locarno as well, Rotterdam. She did a whole tour. Again, it was very, very successful. And she started developing this film that is basically a research film on intimacy and the way and the unexpected ways in which human beings experience intimacy. She started developing it in 2010 in the Netherlands, actually, in what was called then the Binger Film Lab. That was, again, one of the most amazing development programs that existed. Sadly, it's not...
No, it's gone. It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah. It was structured in two, pretty much like Torino Film Lab is now. It had a script development and the director's lab. And in the director's lab, after you had gone through the script development, you could shoot a scene of the film with your colleagues. And this is, and this is what she did. This was the pitching trailer, basically, because she was able to test her process. Her process is informed. If you know family constellations, it's a group therapy method in which you are able to, in a group of people, you are able to tell, to project, let's say, a fear or a memory from your past, and the people who are in the group, they can reenact the memory or the fear. One is your father and the other is your mother, and what happens between them, by this reenactment, you get a new approach on that memory because you see it from the outside, played in front of you. So this has a strong emotional impact. And this is pretty much what she was trying to do, also in development and in the shooting process of Touch Me Not, working with the protagonists, which are a mix of professional and non-professional actors, and setting up this frame of fiction, let's say, in which they could explore parts of their intimate lives, fears, dreams, without anybody around needing to know what is personal. So they could have a persona, let's say, and just talk about that from the persona's point of view, but you never need to know what's going to happen. And I would show, because the beginning is just giving you a setup of how the camera works, because Adina is in the film. So basically, she's talking to the protagonists, and while through this device that you've seen mounted in front of the camera, the protagonists were able to see her face. And so they were looking directly at the audience. And she is in the film talking to them, and also, actually, she's one of the protagonists of the film. And I want to show you a clip that is a very good example of the process, which is workshop 1. And before we play it, just to give them to give you a little insight on it, part of the story is informed by the actual real life of the characters. For instance, in this case, the protagonist, Christian Bayerlein, he's a physically disabled man who is not an actor. And when we were doing research about this in Leipzig, we met a woman who is sort of a therapist and also a choreographer who works with physically disabled people. And Adina and her, they designed this workshop inspired by the types of workshops that she does, which is a lot of body work, tantra also, and dance moves. So they designed this emotional anatomy workshop, especially for the film. And this is the, let's call it the fictional frame, in which the characters are in this emotional anatomy workshop, but everything that is happening inside the workshop is real, because it happens from the genuine interaction of the two people who have never met before. And so in terms of production, the whole setup was we find the location and we shoot 2 cameras, documentary style. So we don't know what's gonna happen. There was a scheme of lights, very basic. Sound was only planted, mics planted in some parts of the room where we thought something might happen at some point. So a lot of what happened with Touch Me Not, we had, for sound post-production, we had to redo a lot of the dialogue afterwards because we didn't have good sound. So now let's see the workshop 1 scene, please.
Take a deep breath in. Try to synchronize your breathing with the breathing of your partner. And then open your eyes and just look at each other. Enjoy a moment of eye contact. And be aware of your breathing. Breathe into your fingertips for a moment. Send all your energy to your fingertips. And softly start to use your fingers to explore the face of your partner. And try to imagine how the face looks just with your fingers. Just like every fingertip is a little eye, exploring this new landscape. When you're ready to explore new territory, and go to the nose, the sides of the mouth, take your time. And then, very slowly, lift off your hands. No. No. Slowly come back to yourself. So, Thomas and Christian, can you describe what you feel in this journey?
Going through this roller coaster up and down with all the emotions. And I tried to find a point in your eyes where I could really see into your soul or something. But I had a bit of trouble seeing that. And I also noticed that there is some coverage of, I mean, it felt like there would be some cover over, when I would envisage your soul as a proper object, then I would say that there is a cover or a blanket over it. I don't know how to interpret that or how I could really notice that, although it was just an impression in my head.
Mm-hmm.
I hope I don't hurt you when I say something like that.
Thomas, how was it for you?
It's a very intimate part of the body, the face. It's not it's not very easy, but it's I don't know. It becomes so intimate. It's like if you were falling from a cliff. But I don't know what to say, but it's both good and frightening to go into this zone. More than any other part of the body, the face is something very personal, and normally you don't let anyone into this space.
What did you feel when you touched his face?
It was not as easy around the mouth for me. It was more challenging there. Also, like body fluids, like saliva, is something very, you're not used to get in contact with that necessarily. It's not so easy to be so direct. For me, normally I don't say things like this so directly.
It's good. I'm totally fine with that. I enjoy the feedback.
What feelings did this bring up?
It's a rejection, like overwhelming. It's just you want to leave. When there's something overwhelming, you don't want to be where you are.
I guess, this clip very well takes us to a little bit the essence of Touch Me Not, in the sense also of the play of the process, but also the need to create a safe space where
Definitely.
this would be possible for everybody participating in this film. So what is your role? Now that you can look back at it also, what was your role in also creating this space and guarding it, I guess, because it's something that was continuously needed?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think it was very important that I understand exactly what Adina wants to do. It's not something that you can easily explain to a crew. So, yeah, I think that we were kind of on the same level of understanding towards the fact that we're trying to do something that is experimental, and I'm not meaning this in the sense of cinema experimentation, but just it was uncharted territory, and for both of us and for the crew as well. So this type of setup was something that we didn't know how to do. So there's a big degree of spontaneity, and a lot of shit can go wrong, pardon my French. But it was important that we set up what we essentially want, and what we essentially wanted was to create this safe space where this type of trust can be formed between the protagonists and the filmmaker, but also between the protagonists and the crew that was witnessing more or less what was going on. So it was kind of like this group forming a community around this subject matter. And what I did was I became Adina's first assistant director, because obviously I was the person who knew best what her intentions were. I knew her process. And in order to be able to form this safe space, first of all, I had to do a lot of research myself. So, for instance, here, in this case, we shot this in Leipzig because we had a co-production was set up that way. So we had a German co-producer and we had to spend the funds in the Leipzig area. So I went there for 6 weeks in 2 years to do this development research myself. Because
without Adina?
Without Adina, yeah. It was me, and I took an assistant, and I had in the first time I went and was really development research. The second time was pre-production research. And the first time I had just an assistant, and of course the producer from the production house who was helping me out. I needed to know by myself what are the possibilities. This would influence, of course, the budget. This would influence the type of people that I would come with from Romania, or, you know, the crew. I did try to look for a first AD for Adina, but it was very hard because all the first ADs who were super professional, but they were very used to working with fiction, and we weren't doing fiction. We needed, you know, somebody who could understand, how to shape this shooting schedule in order to make room for anything to happen, which is kind of absurd when you ask a first AD this. It's really not compatible with their job description. So we said, okay, we don't want to traumatize anybody, so let's do it ourselves. So we did it ourselves. It wasn't perfect. Obviously, we did a lot of mistakes on the way. It was very hard to handle, you know, with professional crew that was used to working in a very specific way. We couldn't do long hours of shooting because, for instance, Christian would get tired, so we had 8 hours max of shooting day, which sometimes it was good because in Romania we have 12 hours of shooting per day, so it can be very tiring. So I became Adina's first AD. I did the research in order to understand what we're getting ourselves into, you know. There's a scene in the film in a fetish club. I did the research, we shot it in Germany as well, because we don't have fetish clubs in Romania, although I did look, and I went to several parties, but they didn't look good. The setups
it wasn't fetish.
Kind of ugly, yeah, and kitsch, yeah. So Germany was the best for it. It's
a good tip, guys.
Yeah, I know a lot of them. You can ask me after the talk, yeah.
It's another session recorded. In the program.
When we're not on film, yeah. I did go through. There's a scene in the fetish party where there's shibari.
The fetish party is a scene in the film, yeah, for the ones who haven't seen it.
Yeah, where it's an actual fetish club, and the people who are in the film are people who are actually visiting. They're part of the BDSM community, and they're the club goers. And we basically just reenacted the party, but for them. Especially for them, but we had our characters and cameras around. So we just shot documentary style in a BDSM party. But before that, in order to get that, and in order to get all those people to be at a party where they are allowing us to shoot, that was 6 months of research. And Adina did interviews filmed interviews with each and every person that is in that room, although some people you don't even see their faces. Between 3 hours and 6 hours long interviews in order for her to understand, okay, their motivation, what is their background, how does the fetishism work for them and in their intimate lives and all that. So based on these interviews, she actually, she did the selection for the final party scene. And I did, in order for her to get to meet these people, I did several researchers, and one of them was actually being tied up myself in a shibari session. Because shibari kind of looks dangerous, I needed to understand what's the danger in this, and nobody can tell you, there's no science around shibari. You just need to feel it yourself, or at least that's how I felt that I needed to understand a little bit.
I was already going to ask you this question, but now even more. I mean, the way you approach this in work is that you totally go actually into the creative process of the directing, but they're wanting to completely understand that.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you keep what I would like a sane line between their creative process and your own creative process? I mean, you also come from script writing, so you also come from telling stories and like continue doing what you do to stimulate the director and not put out your own ideas there. How do you get to that line?
Well, for me, it's very simple. It's the idea of the film that is stronger than any other person's creative ego. So how we work is that we serve the film. So if the film is the idea of the film that we had set out from the development, because we saw the images coming together and what they can create and move inside us. So once we know the core of that, where we're going, then this sets a playground. And on that playground, whether I come with an idea of how to make things work in a particular way, or the director comes with an idea, it doesn't matter. Or the camera assistant, where there's a democracy that is ruled by the idea of the film that is conceived by the director. So,
there's a reference that is constantly there and clear for everybody.
Yeah, and the director is definitely the one who knows. In both these cases, with Alexander and with Adina, they are the one leading the game. I mean, but it's just when you don't need to, or at least I don't need to be creator on my own, and there's no such thing as that. If you understand exactly, then you can just go and follow.
We have a question over here. Can you please stand up when you ask your question?
Hi, thank you for your talk. Kind of follow-up question on your method. So I imagine that you come back from the shibari session to home or your office and you open Excel sheet to do the producer work.
That's right.
So what's the, do you have assistants or how does that work, that part of the producing?
I do open Excel sheets. I work a lot with Excel
sheets. She's an Excel wizard, I can tell you.
Yeah, I am. I love that program. It's just, it's much simpler than all the rest. So
you actually, I guess the question also is, do you also actually do the producer's job as well?
I do. I have 2 assistants. One, because what happened is that Alexander and Adina happened to make films at the same time, which was not the case before. So I ended up having 2 projects at the same time, which is against my personal, conviction. But when Adina was in post-production, Alexander started shooting collective. And I was one, only me. So I got an assistant whom I'm working with for Touch Me Not, and now for Adina's next project that we're developing. And another assistant who is doing Alexander's films, well, now Collective. She was only on Collective so far. And what I do after I go research is I go to the director and I talk to her, and after I talk to her, I go to the Excel sheets. So it's first director, then Excel sheets. Never Excel sheets and afterwards director, because then most times there's a conflict when you just do things and impose them. That's how I feel.
But you go to the director and you discuss how far in detail do you involve them in the what we would call the actual producing job?
Very much, very much. I really think that the director needs to be involved in the budgeting. I think that the director should know how to read a financing plan and to read the budget and to understand the budget and to understand the consequences of a budget.
And the consequences of co-producing.
Yes, definitely. And so I mean, both Alexander and Adina are producers on their own films. They've opened their own companies. This is an anomaly, actually, of Romania, because, yeah, I'm not going to go into that. We have a very old school point system. And so the new coming directors, the young directors, open their own production companies so that they can separate from the old school producers. So now every director has a company, but not every director has a producer, and not every director can be a producer. This is a surprise we've discovered on the way. So, but in these two very particular cases, both Alexandra and Adina are producers on the film, and they did production work. Also because it's very hard, in this kind of process where they are very much involved, they're at the center of the process. It's hard to come, from the outside and impose. It's you need to support. You don't need to impose your production skills on somebody who is, inside a working method that just needs support. You need to understand that. And you need to give them what they need when they need it, not to, if you anticipate, you can anticipate for yourself, but it's not going to help. It's like with children growing up. You can't just tell them everything from the first year of life, how it's going to be in high school. You can't, they're not going to understand. I mean, and you cannot know because...
But don't you have, looking back now at these three productions, situations where even though they are experiencing it themselves, so learning along the way also what producing is, the production reality is very far from their director creative process reality. And how do you deal with that?
I wouldn't say so, because when they are so much involved in the production scheme as well, then they inform themselves at the same time. This is, from my perspective, this is what's great about working with Alexandra and Adina on a similar level, is because if they get to understand what are the consequences of their, let's say, creative decisions in terms of budget or production reality, then, and if they're flexible, then we can change these things together. And they are flexible, up to the point where they don't compromise their own creativity. So yeah, that's how it goes for me, at least. First, talk to the director, then do Excel sheets, and then take Excel sheet to director, then do another round, and the final Excel sheet you can work with for financiers and stuff.
One of the things that is very clear, what has come up several times, is how the development process in the end defines or sets the tone for the production stage. Can you go back now to examples where you can, looking back, you can see that something that was already done in development was crucial for how it worked out in the production of Touch Me Not or Toto or Collective?
Yeah, yeah. For Touch Me Not, definitely, because the development was pretty much setting up Adina's process of working. You know, so we don't have in the film actual development footage, but we've recreated some of the development footage in the final film, because of technical workflow, we shot with ARRI cameras, so we wanted to have the same quality throughout, and there was a Blackmagic as a third camera, but the development footage was not good enough. Yeah, not in that quality. So yeah, I would say for Adina, the development was crucial because that's when she met the characters, that's how she set up the relationship with them. For Collective, the development was...
Maybe we should just... Collective is Alexander Nanou's new film. It's screening at the festival. I think the first screening is Sunday.
Sunday at 9:30 p.m.
Go see it, because it's really very impressive, and again, very different than the other two films we've talked about. Maybe you can just briefly say what it is about.
And we will also screen the pitching trailer for Collective. I don't have any footage to show you from the film. The film is dealing with the aftermath of a very big tragedy that happened in recent Romanian history. In 2015, before Halloween, there was a big fire in a music club during a concert, and that resulted with 64 young people dying. But only 24 died during the fire. The rest died in hospitals because of infections that they caught from the hospitals that had killing bacteria. Our film deals with the year that followed, 2016. Because of this big corruption scandal with the fire in the club that didn't have exits, fire exits and stuff, people went out into the streets protesting, and they brought down the government. A new government was assigned, a technocrat government, that would have a one-year mandate until the next general elections. The general elections were in December 2016. So we have followed throughout the year, again, the two protagonists. One of them is an investigative journalist who is unveiling this whole health system corruption, what happened inside the hospitals where the people died from Collective. And the second protagonist is the Minister of Health, a newly appointed Minister of Health who comes halfway, who tries to do some reforms and who allows us an unprecedented access into his cabinet. So we're basically there with him, as we were with Toto in his tiny room where you saw it with his drug-addicted uncles. We are now in the Minister of Health's cabinet. Yeah, so I would like to show you the pitching trailer that we had for the central pitch in 2016, and just to link it to your previous question, the development with Collective was actually again interviews. This is Alexander's way of working. He just first goes to meet people and to talk to them, but there's always a camera. And
but the interviews are not in the film. There are no talking heads in the film. It's completely observational.
Yes, and this is something that I've noticed with his method, you know, that he goes and talks to the people, putting the camera in front of them. It's also a good way to see how a person reacts to the presence of a camera, but also to have everything recorded, because then you transcribe, and that's the material from which you outsource the synopsis and all the written texts that you need for financing. So he shot, the whole idea of the film came from an actress friend who was in the car with him and our co-producer Hanka Kastelitsova from HBO Europe, who was also the co-producer on Toto and His Sisters, and one of our close collaborators, also a creative input. She has a big creative input, a creative producer. So they were together in a car going to the European Film Academy, where we were nominated with Toto. And a collective had just happened, and this actress said, "Why don't you make a film about this? It's a really big issue." So Hanka and Alex said, "Yeah, why don't we do a film about this? So let's start making a film about this." And he did. So he came back from the IDFA, and he started first talking with the parents of the victims to understand. He had a lot of interviews with them. He had a team of 2 researchers, 2 journalists who researched everything that had happened before. And so this was happening in December 2015, only 1 month, 2 months after the tragedy happened. And in January, he started shooting more with the parents, and in March, I think he went to Tolontan. So it was, yeah. And since he went to Tolontan...
That's the main character in the film?
The journalist, the investigative journalist. Since he went there, he followed him for the whole year. So here, the development, it's a bit...
It's also a story that unfolds as he was there shooting, because he...
Yeah. So I would say the development was just these first months where he, again, had to research what's going on, the context and everything. He had the team of researchers. He wrote the first treatment. And then when he found his character, he just, locks on it. And that's when production starts, from my point of view also. But it's not always the same with the money. So the money doesn't always come when he finds his character, but it's...
But that's actually an interesting thing, because the comparison, even though they're very different between working with these 2 different directors, with Touch Me Not, it was about creating this safe space where people could be vulnerable and things could happen. And I guess with Alexander, with Toto, and with Collective, it's more creating the frame so when he locks to his character, he can just go and do what he wants to do.
Yeah, yeah. So let's show you the pitching trailer of Collective, please.
A deadly nightclub fire in Bucharest, Romania.
Dozens of people are dead after a fire at a nightclub in Bucharest.
Am hotărât atunci noi să credem medicii.
La început noi așa am crezut, că el vedeam ca salvatorul copiilor noștri pe el.
Eu vreau să vă asigur că tot ceea ce se poate face și în Germania, facem și noi aici, pentru toți.
Ca asta au discutat. Trebuie să o potolim cumva.
De la noi nu vor afla niciodată nimic. Dar vrem doar să vă spunem ca să nu vă afecteze pe dumneavoastră, să fiți protejată.
La noi în spital sunt germeni foarte rezistenți la antibiotice. Dacă se va infecta cu acești germeni, se va termina totul.
Substanțele astea au fost în spitalele unde au fost internați răniții de la colectiv. Pentru dezinfectarea instrumentarului.
substanța activă a lui ar trebui să fie de 12%. Și analiza care ne-a venit acum arată că ea este de 1,17%.
Directorul Hexi Pharma, Alexandru Condrea, a dat primele explicații procurorilor în scandalul dezinfectanților diluați.
Ți-am zis ce se va întâmpla? Ca să fac pe deștept, dacă ajungem să ne batem în chimie cu guvernul, o să tremurăm.
Un accident în care Dan Condrea, iată, a căzut victimă și nu în ultimul rând să nu uităm despre posibilitatea unei crime.
Era decedat? La momentul în care au ajuns polițiștii, persoana era decedată.
Mă aflu acum în fruntea acestui sistem care cu siguranță trebuie îndreptat. Dar primul lucru pe care trebuie să-l faci ca să câștigi sau să recâștigi încrederea cuiva este să încerci să-l minți.
Totul este în pixul ministrului. Totul este în pixul ministrului, pentru că ministrul le știe pe toate, nu-i așa?
Cu echipa actuală, cu lumea din minister și din alte câteva instituții subordonate, nu poți să faci prea multe. Ce clar că acolo trebuie asta.
Încrederea în instituții a scăzut atât de mult, acceptăm orice explicație, mai puțin incompetența, corupția sistemului pe care noi înșine l-am creat.
This Alexander started shooting in March 2017? 16, and this was at the end of 2016 at the forum.
Yeah, in August. November,
November,
but we did it in August. The
so you had done part of the shooting.
Yeah, we had done part of the shooting, but at the same time I was looking now and remembering that actually what you see here is just glimpses of, the story, but not exactly what's inside. I mean, you just had, the minister had just started doing the reforms and...
and also in the beginning there are some interviews with people, which is obviously the research material, and it's not in the final film. Actually, thinking about that also, that you use this as a pitch at the IDFA Forum, which is really a platform for as broad as we can get financiers, but mainly television. I mean, you already had HBO Europe on board, but that's also, I think, an interesting bridge to talk about your role also in approaching and keeping the relationship with financiers, with also these particular projects where directors really have their vision, but financiers might also see other things, and how you, what you also need to manage those relations, and at the same time also approach the proper financiers, sell them the project, I guess, in a way that doesn't lose the creative vision of the director. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, with Adina it was actually, to go back a little bit to Touch Me Not, because her process was more, let's say, unconventional in terms of producing and financing. There it was interesting because it was quite hard to put the creative dossier together, when you need to explain an approach, but at the same time you need to tell financiers, we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we think there's something here, so you should support us. And the first dossier was as a fiction film, in which there was an attempted an attempt of script. It was actually just scenes that were reenactments of some of the development footage, and we applied with that at the National Film Fund, and it got rejected because one of the members of the commission thought it was a pornographic film. And only after Cristian Mungiu and Michel Reiac, who was then the head of Arte France, they wrote some complaint letters to the Minister of Culture. Nothing changed, of course, in terms of the results of the film fund, but 2 years later, because the next year, that was tragic actually, the next year we didn't have a commission for films because there was the crisis. So only in 2013 we were able to apply again with the same dossier, and we didn't change one word, and we got the top position and for the debut. Film debut. But from then on, applying to all the other, for instance, in France at the CNC, this whole fiction setup didn't actually work because you couldn't understand what's beyond the simple the simple scenes and the characters that were described that way. And what was essentially interesting was the process that Adina was going through with these protagonists. So what we did was we shifted the perception, and we applied for a documentary. It's also interesting because it's a hybrid actually. So it is documentary, but put in a, let's say, a fiction frame. And back then, in 2013, it was very hard to explain all this hybrid thing. There was a lot of rejection around this new terminology.
Did you use the word hybrid? Or reenactments and things like that in your applications?
We used a mix of reality and fiction. Which is what it was essentially, you know. We didn't use documentary because we thought that it's too it's too much of a label. So Dina and I, we were constantly struggling, you know, with this labeling of the industry.
No, I mean, I'm also asking because running a fund myself, whenever you read an application, and we are a documentary fund, so we're documentary, though we take it broad, but you read hybrid or reenactment, you really need to be able to explain why and what you want with that, because the alarm bells start ringing.
Yeah, exactly. So what she did was she reshaped her entire dossier, where she wrote her the intention, the statement of intention of the director. She wrote it in the form of a letter to her own mother. In which she was explaining to her mother, and part of the letter you see in the beginning of the film, some phrases. In this letter, she was showing her intention of making the film against these educational boundaries that we have from childhood, and all the things that keep us from having a genuine relationship to the mother. This was something that anybody could relate to, you know, a letter to a mother reading it. But also inside this letter, you could understand her process and her approach. And this was followed by a very detailed description of her process, of the way she, sorry, the way she finds the protagonists and how she works with them, the casting process, the fact that they're real characters and that they are reenacting some of the things that have happened in their lives. So you kind of understand, if you're a documentary fund, you kind of understand that you need the fiction frame in order to get to something that is real and authentic. And this way, when we had that, and the whole director's dossier was bigger than the actual creative dossier, but it worked, you know. And we got both documentary funding. For instance, in Bulgaria, we applied for documentary slate and fiction. So this going back to how it worked. I think, with Adina, it's the most particular thing rather than with collective.
And did you with Touch Me Not also work with financiers from television or not?
No, we tried, but we do have a pre-sale on HBO Europe. No, HBO Romania. Sorry. Back when we were financing it as a fiction film, so they pre-bought the film based on the fiction film, but they loved also the outcome, because obviously the film is really very different from the development materials. But luckily they liked also what they saw. And we did try to get Arte on board and ZDF, and that was, again, there's this limit of how much nudity you can have on TV, and yeah, that was always an issue there. And we didn't want to censor the whole film. Although we were Adina was like very open to creatively censor her own film, which is interesting.
Are there any questions before we start? Yes, please, Mike.
Hi. You said you want to do one film at a time, but how do you manage?
Running a company, you mean?
Yeah, running a company and
surviving. Yeah.
Continuity.
There needs to be food on the table.
Yeah. I ask myself that question every day. Well, this is a difficult question, because actually all the time I get to have it happen that I have two films at the same time, you know? And I keep saying that I only want to make one film at a time, but it always happens that they're overlapping, and it's not something that is a conscious decision, you know? It's just when you, like for instance with Alexander's next film, Collective, I had just come back from the shooting of Touch Me Not, from the last shooting in Germany in 2016, and Alexander calls me and he says, I think we have a new film. And I was just, you know, on my way for a 1-month vacation after this whole trip. And I told Alexander, of course, I'm coming to the office tomorrow. And I went to the office, and you can't say no. I mean, when you see, you know, when he brings on the table, you can't say I'm going on or at least I cannot say I have this problem with dealing with personal and work, probably, that I cannot say no to something so powerful, and I did not go into vacation. So when you kind of, I think the secret is that you really only do one thing, at least for me, when the type of work that I do, that I try to explain, that is very close to the filmmaker. I think the ideal way to do it, in order to survive sanely and to have some money in your pocket, is to do one film at a time, but to start developing one when you're in post-production with the other. But really keep this very strictly in a way, because first of all, when you're in post-production and the editing is going on, in my case, with all these films, the editing process took a long time. There was a lot of material, and it's not easy to sort it out. And there were times when the director really didn't need me on the table, because they were just figuring out their own material. So that is a time when you have a little bit of brain space to think about what could happen once this film is out. And yeah, for me, I think this is the ideal. When you're in post-production, you already start, maybe do an application with or without the director and get some funds going, or just start talking about the next film when you are in the festival with the film that you're just finishing. So when you have the premiere of your film, then you immediately just implant the
No, but I think that's very wise for producers and directors. When you make a film and you get the opportunity to travel to other festivals, it's great because you're celebrating what you just finished, but it's also a perfect opportunity to start thinking about that future and your next project and using whatever you encounter at all these different places you travel to.
Yeah, and the other thing, the financial aspect of doing only one thing at a time. I'm not the type of entrepreneur producer. I'm not doing films because I want to produce films. So I only get involved in projects that move me, first of all, on a personal level, and projects that I feel will have a big impact. Impact not necessarily in terms of how many people see the film, but how they can change something on a long term. So this is a dedication that, you know, transcends a little bit the profit making. And you just need to be very honest with yourself and think, okay, how much money do I need to be comfortable working in this way? And just budget that money. And when you get financing, just take that money that you deserve in order to keep going. With Adina, we have this saying, you know, first, it's like in the planes, first put your own seatbelt and then help the others. Or put your own oxygen mask, because if I'm out, then for sure part of the film will suffer. So yeah, being honest with how much you need and how you budget it, I think that's, and taking it from your financing, I mean from the money that you get, taking yourself into consideration in a way.
But sometimes the reality is that you're not able to close your budget, and the first thing you can cut down on are your fees as a director and as a producer.
Yeah, that happens, of course. Yeah. But, you know, it's not... when you start budgeting, you don't think about how you're not going to finance your film. I mean,
it's about having it in the budget as a budget line.
Yes, and, you know, and splitting it in time. I mean, being aware that you might not finance or trying to have a timeline. How long will it take me to find 1.5 million euros? That's going to take a little bit of time, you know, if you have a 1.5 million euro budget. But out of that 1.5, let's say you have a 10% fee. So you're not going to take from the first financing all of that fee. It's absurd. No, you're going to take a little part. And that's what I'm saying, that you need to be honest to yourself and know how much do you need in order to go on without thinking, okay, tomorrow I'm not going to have money anymore. So it's not easy. I mean, I'm not saying that I found a recipe to success, and I don't know if this is a sustainable way of working, but I'm not the type of producer that would take on more projects just to roll money. I don't, yeah, I'm a cinema lover, so I make films because I want to see them in the end, you know? And yeah, it's kind of not compatible, actually.
Any other questions? No? Well, Bianca, I'm a cinema lover. I love that as a finishing phrase. Thank you very much for your time and for talking to us.
Thank you
for being
very
here.
Much.